This is a classic case. I left church last Sunday, right afterwards, and drove to Pennsylvania to do my annual hiking trip with my two hiking girlfriends. You can tell I put this order of worship together a while ago because the sermon title is not at all the direction I ended up going. On that annual hiking trip, we hiked in the Pinchot State Forest and the Lehigh Gorge State Forests. It was wonderful, as usual, to be moving about in the woods and just enjoying nature. Unfortunately, we were infested with some really gross bugs. They're kind of like ticks, only with wings. They're called deer heads. And it turns out that they're not from the United States. They were brought over from Europe by accident. Now, it turns out they're not a disease vector, and they don't bite. But what they do is get into your, I see one person who's from Pennsylvania who's already scratching her head. They get into your hair, and they just hang out there. So every day after we were done hiking, we would pick them off of each other for a while, and then we would be driving home and be like, oh, I see one, I gotta get it out of there. And then we would shower and dry all of our clothes so we could kill anything in our clothes. Lovely hiking, but quite an experience. Human behavior brought them. Human behavior. And dear God, I hope they don't make it to Maine too soon. I mean, they're not dangerous, but they are a little disgusting. Anyway, it's a reminder that we are not invisible to the world. The world sees us. Nature sees us. We have an impact on this world. Now, it is human nature to be kind of grandiose about all the ways that we can dominate and conquer the world, building our tall buildings and our grand dams and our network of highways. But we're often unaware of how we impact and affect the whole world in harmful ways. It's one of the gifts of church. Church is a place where we try to right-size ourselves as human beings. Week after week, we try to pay attention to who we are, how we can impact the world both intentionally for good, but how we might be impacting it unintentionally for ill. We try to understand ourselves and our impact on other human beings and on all of creation. And I'd suggest that this is actually the right way to think about God as well. God, not as a being dominating the earth with his omniscience, omnipresence, and omnipotence, but rather God as relationship, energy, and flow. It's the gift of the whole image of the Trinity, God as dancing energy of relationship with itself and with us. God is interconnected and wanting relationship with us, hoping that we will focus more on relationship than simply on ourselves. That we will learn something about mutuality and belonging and interconnectedness. And I think that brings us to humility. Now, we often think about humility first as making ourselves small. But true humility is not about us being small relative to others. It's about being right-sized, about attending to the relationships and the impacts that we have on one another, on the community, and on our world. Sometimes that means stepping back and making room for others to take some more space. Sometimes that means acknowledging how big an effect we have had, intentionally or unintentionally, and trying to address and correct that. Sometimes it means using our influence or our gifts intentionally and boldly for the betterment of our communities. Sometimes it means letting go and letting other things happen without our control. That's just what today's gospel story tells us. These two men at the temple to pray, one a Pharisee and the other a tax collector. Now, listeners of Jesus' day would have heard tax collector and Pharisee and would have known who the villain and who the hero ought to be in that story. The villain, a tax collector, because they were not much liked. I mean, the IRS is not beloved now, but in Jesus' time, tax collectors collaborated with Rome. They took on commissions from the very people who oppressed others, and they tried to squeeze as much out of others as they could, keeping some for themselves. That's how many tax collectors became wealthy. It was kind of always after the little guy for more money and then enriching themselves with it. Yet this particular tax collector goes to pray in complete awareness of his true size before God. God, be merciful to me, a sinner, he prays. There's no illusion or pretense. He knows who he is and what he has done. The Pharisee, on the other hand, stands tall and prays about himself, how good he is, how generous, how righteous. But his prayer gets stuck in the orbit of his own ego. The Pharisee is unaware of the impact of his pious judgmentalism. The tax collector is aware and ashamed. Humility is an odd thing for any of us to aim for. Most of us can fake humility pretty well. Oh, don't worry about me. I'll take the worst seat. I don't need any thanks for anybody for what I've done. Let me tell you what I've done, but don't thank me. We know how to sound humble while still centering ourselves. Jesus isn't interested in manners or, frankly, in modesty. Jesus is interested in us knowing our true size in the universe and living out of that awareness. That's why the pairing of this parable with Psalm 65 is so perfect. Psalm 65 sings of the vastness of creation, of mountains and rivers, of the generosity of God's provisioning for us. And it's hard to think about nature and its beauty without feeling insignificant. And yes, I had deer kids, but I had a week of enjoying the beauty of nature and letting nature right-size me again. Humility isn't about erasing ourselves, it's about locating ourselves rightly, treasured among many things that is treasured by God in God's great interconnected creation. The experience of humility is essentially and existentially an experience of the divine presence. We stand before the sea or under a canopy of stars or in a forest teeming with life, and we know we are not the center of things. We are part of something vast, much bigger than us. We are part of the aliveness of the whole of creation with mutual joy and beauty and love. Humility calls us not to self-denying aloneness, but to a deep and existential interconnectedness. It calls us into the very experience of the Trinity, that kind of dancing, relating, rejoicing, supporting, reinforcing, revealing, reveling sacredness. And when we see that, and when we let ourselves be seen by that, we are for a moment the right size.